Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to be presenting to you the methods I've been employing to remain injury-free for the past 3 years. I used to be the guy that was constantly hurt, meaning that when I stepped into the gym there was always some level of pain keeping me back. It was either tendonitis or something more serious. And I know that this is something that's widespread now, where if you ask a gym bro how he's feeling, he'll tell you, oh, my knee bothers me or I have problems with my shoulder. And that's because when you train, you're going to accumulate fatigue, and that fatigue can, in a sense, manifest in pain. Pain by itself is not a problem. We've all faced that. The issue is the way we deal with pain. Because I'm starting to see people normalize that type of hurt, in a sense, to the point that some think it's even badass to feel pain and to train on pain, to train through the pain. On a romantic level, I sort of agree, but on a practical level, it's completely idiotic. Because pain is something, a warning sign that is, in a sense, an announcement of something horrible to come. And that something horrible is an injury that is going to prevent you from training. Because at some point, pain becomes a handicap where you just can't go through anymore. All of that badass energy doesn't work anymore because the function of the tendon or the muscle that used to be painful is now completely gone. And we want to avoid that at all costs. So I'm going to teach you the things I've been applying to my training to go from this knucklehead mindset into a mode where pain is gone, function is restored, and the gains can continue. Because between a guy that's all badass and pushing through the pain but who's constantly out of commission, and another one that's more precocious but actually gets to put in the work, the one that makes the most sense and the one that is going to go the furthest is the second one. So let's get into it. The first lesson I learned is that going to failure every single time is not necessarily a good idea. And this is when reps in reserve come into play. I've made a video about reps in reserve 2 years ago that you can actually check out if you want. It's still on the channel. And when I made it, I was getting started with the practice. And the more I apply it, the more I realize how great it is. Meaning that it truly is a tool that anyone who wants to train for a long time and who wants to make progress for a long time should implement in their training. Because unlike what some people might tell you, it's not being lazy, it's not being soft or not wanting to put in the work. It's actually the exact opposite. Too many people think that reps in reserve is the opposite or even the enemy of training to failure. And that's not true, because you can use the two together. You're not forced to do one or the other. And actually, if you do apply reps in reserve properly, it's going to be for the purpose of being able to go to failure. Why? Because you're going to pick your battles. If you take a look at the way you train, if you go balls to the wall every single time, you understand that your methods are not discriminating, meaning that you're not selecting the sets that make the most sense for you to go to failure with. You're going to failure all the time, meaning also that you're not really going to failure because you're not allocating your resources properly. If you put 100% of your energy in everything, that's not 100%. And it's a lesson that took me a long time to understand. But now that I actually integrate that lesson, I realize how beneficial it can be. Because there is such a thing as the red zone. It's something I preach for movement patterns. There is a red zone in every single movement, a portion of the range of motion that's the riskier because it puts you in a very disadvantageous position, but that also tends to be the position where you actually manage to utilize your muscles the most. So it's a balancing act. It's exactly like reps in reserve. Do you want to always dodge the red zone? No, but you want to be precautious when you enter it because it's where the most danger is. Same for reps in reserve. Going to failure is very important because these are the most intense reps that produce the most muscle damage, but they're also the ones that incur the most risk because that's where you get injured. If you were to make a tally of the times where lifters get injured, yeah, you can get injured when you warm up, of course, but most of the time it's when you lift heavy weights, you take the weight to failure, and it usually occurs within the last few reps because it's when you're the most fatigued. So we have to look at these reps properly and without emotion. This is where we get the most hurt. So it makes a ton of sense to cut them out of the program once in a while. Not all the time, but we don't always want to do those reps. Keep in mind one thing, these last 2 reps that you grind are not magical. It's still just tonnage. It's very high quality tonnage, but if you don't do them, it's not the end of the world. A set of 6 on the squat, if you only do 4, those first 4 reps are also very high quality tonnage. You're still getting growth from it. The difference is that you might be able to, 1 session or 2 sessions out of 4 or 5, cut down on these extra reps, which will allow you for the next session to get them done. Even though you're technically being outdone by someone who always goes to failure, their percentage of injury is much higher than yours. And there's something else that people don't think about. Yes, you can hurt yourself when you do a warm-up, but look at the gravity of the injury. I have found across the board and times again that the gravity of the injury sustained is always much higher when it's sustained with heavy weight. If you pull or you strain something with baby weight, chances are the injury is also going to be fairly light, and therefore it's going to take a much lesser time to heal properly. Whereas if you snap your shit with supramaximal weight, chances are it's going to be pretty severe. So it's always that red zone that comes back into play that we have to deal with very, very cautiously. This is what I want you to think about when you use those reps in reserve. Is it worth it for me to get those reps on that particular day? If the answer is yes, go for it, knowing the risk. If the answer is no, reps in reserve, okay? Take those reps back, because keep in mind that it's reps in reserve. You're not wasting the reps. And this leads me to the following point, the fact that you're going to be able to utilize that energy. You're not doing those extra 2 reps, but that doesn't mean that they're not getting done. They're going to get done on a different set when it's less risky, because you're going to do it lift by lift. It's another, in a sense, misunderstanding of reps in reserve I see all the time. People look at only 1 lift or 1 set and they think, well, you didn't get those 2 reps there, so you didn't really push it to failure, and so you lost some tonnage. It's correct, but there are other sets in the program. Maybe by not doing those 2 reps, you could do an additional 2 sets for a different back off exercise or variation exercise. And just like that, you made up for the lost tonnage and more. It's something I've never really quite been able to explain, and maybe you have actually went through that as well. But I found that if you do your strength work, super heavy work on a deadlift, for example, those extra 2 or 3 reps that you're getting on paper look good, but look at the fatigue you occur. I found that if I fight for these reps, it might shoot me in the foot and I won't be able to do an additional hip hinge afterwards. But if you look at the tonnage and you compare, you're losing on both sides. You incurred a higher injury risk, but then you also lost on the ability to follow up, and that is because these are very fatiguing reps. So sometimes cutting down on that fatigue is the best solution and the best idea, because again, it might allow you to go to failure for the following sets that are going to be done with less weight. And that's because, as I said, you're going to apply reps in reserve according to the lift. So you, for example, might do reps in reserve 2 reps for deadlift, but then you have Romanian deadlift, or maybe a different type of hip hinge like an hyperextension, and here you're going to do reps in reserve 0, because it's a less risky lift. And this is the beauty of reps in reserve in reality, is that it's not black and white. You don't have to do reps in reserve 1 or 2 for every lift. Every lift has its own, and on top of that, it varies. Maybe you go in one day and you feel super fresh and you're ready to do like a PR for the deadlift, you do reps in reserve 0. You don't need to do it all the time. And for certain lifts, it might be 0 all the time. Like for example, for me, a curl, I don't see the point of not going to failure on a curl because it's not risky to go to failure. Same for a press. What is the risk for me to go to failure on the bench? I might not be able to get the rep, the safeties catch the bar, and that's it. So for the most part, you'll find that reps in reserve is really, really good for lower body lifts because the entire body is accumulating fatigue, and so every rep you save can actually make a big difference. This is for the people that are going to try to do reps in reserve as a one-fits-all rule, like you're going to do it for your entire program. No, do it for certain lifts. If you're just getting started into the practice, try for your deadlift or 1 hip hinge or 1 knee flexion and play with it, because it truly is that. It's playing with it. It's managing to actually pinpoint the moments in your program that are the most risky and that are going to give you the less reward, and being able and mature to say, okay, let me try and see what happens if I cut it down. And you will find, like I have found, that for the most part, it's going to make a big difference in the amount of times you get injured and the gravities of your injuries. I used to be the guy who got injured all the time on squats. And then I realized after a while, hey, you always get injured with these 3 or 4 extra reps that you try to grind at the end of the set. But for what purpose? Why don't you cut them down and see what happens? And what happened is that I haven't gotten injured on the squat for the past 3 years. So it was a pretty good idea. And that's actually, keep in mind, an investment. You invest for future sets. I know that if you're a lifter, you want extra gains, you want to squeeze those extra gains. So you're going to always think, well, I could have gotten 2 more reps. And it's that mindset of an extra rep. But keep in mind that this is a mindset that's very in the moment and not projecting into the future. You're thinking too much about that set in particular and not about the rest of the program, the rest of the day, the rest of the week. Think of it as an investment. Okay, I'm not putting in the rep now, but it doesn't mean that it's wasted. I will reinvest it somewhere else in the program. And that is how you approach stimulus to fatigue ratio. Maybe on that set, that extra rep is too much fatigue and not enough stimulus. Maybe your form broke down. Maybe you're going to good morning the weight up. If you think about it properly and logically, where is the tonnage going to go? It's not going towards your legs, you're doing a good morning. So you're going to fatigue your lumbar spine for nothing. Keep that rep, cut it down, reps in reserve. And then when you do another, leg extension movement afterwards, now you can put in that energy because now it's going to be directed towards your quads. This is the way to think about it. So these are the 3 main points of reps in reserve. The concept of the red zone and the form breakdown that leads into these dangerous reps, the lift by lift nuanced approach to the reps in reserve methodology, with the tonnage trade-off of being able to understand that for certain lifts it makes more sense, and then the investment for future sets with the stimulus to fatigue ratio. This is the biggest takeaway from the video, the one that is the most complex because it's related to programming, but it's the one I really encourage you to do. Do not let people, knucklehead bodybuilders, discourage you from reps in reserve because you're not working hard, bro. In 3 years, when they're plagued with injury, you'll be the ones still working hard and putting in the work because you actually managed to select the reps and the sets that you decided were quality and cut down the ones that were just risky or just even useless. The number 2 concept I want to introduce to you guys is the exercise graveyard. An exercise graveyard is a place where you're going to put all of the movements that you've tried in the past but simply don't fit. You and I, we know that there are certain movements we do, we want them to work because we think they're cool, but they simply don't match with the way we're built, they don't feel good, you can't progress with them because they create tendonitis or pain, and yet we still cling on to them. Why? Emotions. We want it to work so fucking hard that we're willing to just be completely blind to the fact that they don't. I know that for a fact because I'm super stubborn. Je suis têtu comme cochon, meaning that if I have a lift that I like, even if the lift doesn't like me, I'll keep doing it and I'll keep doing it, sometimes for years. But at some point, you have to just wake up to the fact that the lift is not for you. And when that happens, put it in the graveyard. The graveyard is the place where you banish those lifts and you don't touch them anymore. The importance of the graveyard is the fact that by doing that, you're going to be able to focus on the lifts that do work. Stop paying attention to the people that hate you and start putting energy towards the ones that love you. It's the same principle for lifts. You have those lifts that work so well for you. Why not put in all your energy in them? Why not do more frequency with them and replace the shitty lifts with the good lifts? There are so many lifts already available to you, hundreds. Why focus so much on the ones that don't work? It's, in a sense, it's a bias of the human mind where we cannot give up on things we've invested time in. It's the sunken cost fallacy. You think, well, I've been doing that lift forever, I don't want to lose all of that training. You won't lose it. You'll apply that muscle memory to another lift because the lift still developed muscle, but now it's going to be for a movement pattern that is actually made for you. So start taking your shovel and start digging that graveyard All of these lifts that you already know are not good for you, you put them all there, and that is going to make a massive difference because you have right now reoccurring injuries and tendonitis that you have developed because of your emotional attachment to certain lifts that don't work for you. Get rid of the lift, get rid of the pain. Number 3 is going to be rotations. This is also a programming principle, but it's much simpler when we apply to injuries. Rotations allow you to do one thing. They allow you to continuously work the muscle without working the movement. And it's also a mindset shift that took me a lot of time because as I morphed into a bodybuilder, I realized that I still had habits of a power lifter, meaning that I constantly was training movement and motion instead of muscle. Example, I insisted for some reason of doing conventional deadlift every 4 or 5 days. Why? Because I was afraid of detraining on the deadlift and losing strength. But the issue is that I wasn't thinking about it like a bodybuilder. A bodybuilder looks at the deadlift like a hip hinge. So, if you train the hip hinge every 2 or 3 days, you'll be just fine. Even if your deadlift detrains, which by the way, it won't. It's something I realized. Your strength will remain there. And how do you do that? You do rotations. My new program, and actually next Thursday, I think I'm going to make a full expose on my new program for you guys because I know you're curious, has a shit ton of rotations. I do a ton of lifts and they rotate and pivot all the time because I've realized that this is the best way to avoid injuries. Overuse injuries occur not because you train the muscle. The muscle can adapt perfectly well. They occur because you train the muscle in the same fashion with the same angles every single time. It's not that your quad cannot be trained every 48 hours. It's that it cannot be trained every 48 hours with the same joint angle, with the same weight and the same stance. If you modify the stance, you would see that the quad is actually very, very resistant. What is not resistant is the structure that allowed for the movement to go through. So, find a way to shift the structure so as to still get the muscle to work. And this is where rotations come into play. If we connect that to number 2, this is when you also open the gates and you start to look at other lifts and you don't hyper focus on the lifts that don't work for you. Because if there is such a thing as an exercise graveyard, there is also such a thing as an exercise heaven. All of your favorite exercises can enter a rotation, and once that happens, you will find that all of your injuries and your pains of the past were mostly caused by the fact that you were doing the same motions times and times again. Number 4 is going to be stimulate, don't annihilate. It's a message you hear a lot, or you hear the reverse, where people tell you, oh, you have to annihilate the muscle. It's an issue of language, really. I still want you to work hard and to do a lot of set and to tire the muscle out and to hit your baseline, but I want you to do it smartly. We want to work the muscle, not the things around them. So for example, if you get a bicep day and you work your biceps and the next day you have bicep tendon pain, you fucked up because you overtaxed the tendon and the muscle, even if you really tired it, is now going to be out of commission because the structure that allows for the muscle to activate is tired and is going to take much longer to recover. It's why tendonitis is such a pain in the ass. It's because the muscle recovers fast, but the damage done to the tendon and the inflammation can last for weeks, if not months. So we never want to do that. We always want to find a way to actually target the muscle in particular and not the rest. And this is a mindset that is also very important because there's a ton of pains that you have in the gym that I used to have that are caused by an inability to stimulate. For example, SI joint pain. This is the one that is the most common and the most misdiagnosed. I always love when I see guys do deadlifts and then they touch their lower back and they say, oh, I have a pump. That's not a pump. You're touching your pelvis bone. There's no muscle there. What you're feeling is SI joint pain. You inflame your SI joint. Why? Well, maybe you don't know how to actually deadlift, but for the most part, it's people who don't know how to stimulate the muscle and stop at that. So, again, everything is connected. Look to reps in reserve. You want to do deadlifts? Fine, I do deadlifts all the time. Stop before that pain sets in. And if you tell me, well, it sets in super early, it's because your SI joint is pre-fatigued. It's constantly taxed. So you're going to have to pay that tax and then get back into a normal training routine or regimen. Every single time you train, See that your muscle get tired before the joint always, and this is the stimulation that we're looking into. This is key for one simple reason. Why? You want to avoid injury. If these parts of the body are always taxed, one day they snap, and I can tell you that for a fact. I used to have pains in my ribs, and I was like, well, it's just pain, who cares? Well, who cares? The rib, because one day it just snapped. It was tired and overtaxed, and one day it just gave. How many people have lower back pain for years and then they snap it and they say, oh, it was a freak accident? There's no such thing as a freak accident. There's always a sign. When you get hurt in the gym, unless you're a complete fucking moron and you, I don't know, load 100 pounds above your max, you know where that injury came from. There were signs that you ignored and now you're paying the price. So don't be an idiot. Don't annihilate your body all the time. And understand that the ability to stimulate regularly is going to be much more important. If you are the type that shadows his legs every 10 days, you're going to be outdone by a guy like me who stimulates them every 48 hours, 100% of the time. It's the reason why leg days and bro splits produce shitty looking legs, is because it's not the way to approach training the body. Frequency and consistency is always the key. And how do you train consistently? You stimulate, because in stimulation is also the idea of control. And this is again why reps in reserve are so important. Reps in reserve allow you to always shut down the valve when the muscle is stimulated. You don't want to go into annihilation. But if you don't have that and you always go to failure, guess what? You'll always annihilate, because now you have no control. Now the rep range controls you and not the other way around. And this is why you want to use both. Sometimes it's good to go into the red zone and to go to failure, but not all the time, because for too many people, going to failure means getting as many reps as I can until I can't anymore, and that's stupid. I hope you understand that this is stupid. You should be in control of the rep range and of how many reps you're going to get. So that was for my fourth point. And then my fifth point is going to be more of a mindset type of methodology, type of approach, and that is going to be the mixture of patience and listening to the body. Patience, because most of the injuries you're going to occur and the pain you're going to feel in the gym is you trying to push. And why are you trying to push? You're trying to push because you think you're going to get there faster. Typical people who always go to failure. Why do they do it? Well, because they get more reps, more intensity, so they'll get bigger faster. But they might also get injured faster. And as we all know, an injury is a stop. So between a train that refuses to slow down when it turns because it thinks it's going to be able to make the curve faster, and one that always slows down, understand that for the most part, the one that always slows down is going to go further, faster, because it's not going to derail all the time. Yeah, maybe you're here when I'm only here, but you're stopped on the side for a month and I'm still progressing. You know, c'est la tortue, le lièvre et la tortue, the turtle and the hare. There is a reason why this particular parable is so popular. It's because it's true. There's no point in trying to sprint all the time. You have to go at your own pace, and your own pace is the one that is going to allow you to continuously progress. So patience, okay? Patience is going to be your best tool in the quest of actually preventing yourself from accumulating injuries, because I know that for me, every single time I got injured, it was because I was impatient. I had that voice in my ear saying, hey, if you don't do these extra 2 reps, maybe you won't get a PR or you'll regress. And we wanted to get that amount of weight on the bar in 2 months, so you have to do it. And that's when I get injured. And now I have to deload 100 pounds and I have to wait 2 months. And now actually I'm losing. And so it's not something we want to do. And for the listening to your body part, I know it sounds simple, but just like with the exercise graveyard, sometimes you have to be reminded of it. Because until someone else tells you, hey, you're being a dummy, you don't get it. So I'm here to tell you this. Your body knows a ton. There's more wisdom in your body than you think and that you know. So listen to it for once in your life. And I know that you always have people who tell you, well, don't listen to the body, because if you do, you're always going to wimp out or you're going to skip workouts. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying that you will find out that every single time your body is about to snap, it desperately tries to let you know. I know that for me, and it's stupid because it still happens to this day, thank God with less severity, every time I'm about to get injured, I know it. Meaning that before the set, I can tell, hey, this is the set that injures me, and every time it happens, it does. Something snaps. Why? I've developed an instinct for injuries. Now I have to start to listen to that instinct. And I'm sure that you have some of that instinct as well. It's in a sense a misrepresentation of lifters to say that many people have that instinct and listen to it too much. It's rare. For the most part, lifters are way too gung-ho and way too fiery and not analytic and not cold enough. It's always going to be better to take a safety measure and a step back, even on a set that wasn't going to injure you, if your instinct is telling you that, as long as it's not too often, because worst case scenario, you wasted what? A set, 2 reps. Best case scenario, you avoided an injury that would take you out of the gym for a month. So always err on the side of caution when it comes to that. It is a game of inches. So if on one day you're not able to move your pawn 1 inch forward, not the end of the world, you have another day. But if you move your pawn too fast and it gets captured, now you're fucked. So don't make that mistake. Allow yourself a mindset where you're going to be able to slowly move towards a mode where you're not constantly in pain, because it's a life changer. For me, right now, being able to exist without any type of tendon pain, no tendonitis, nothing snapped for 3 years, probably saved my relationship with lifting, because I don't think I could have done it properly, knowing that most likely I was moving towards a life where I wasn't going to be as mobile as I wanted and as pain-free as I wanted in the future. So this is my message to you, and it's my message to bodybuilders everywhere. There is such a thing as pain-free bodybuilding, and actually the best method and the best way to become bigger as you age is pain-free bodybuilding, because the opposite method, for the most part, leads to people who just give up or become completely incapacitated, and we simply don't want that. I hope this was informative, and I will see you very soon. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.